Hey, Husker fans, welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. As always, go Big Red. Good morning, Husker fans, and welcome back to the Husker Big Red podcast. My name is Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette, and we're back here for another episode of our podcast. We've been away for a little bit. We had a few technical issues to sort out and just been a little bit busy, but like I said, we're going to have more regular episodes as the season approaches. We'll get back to our Saturday morning chats. We'll get back to a little more regular content now that we're less than 10 days before the start of fall camp. We got Big Ten Media Days this week. A new commitment for the Huskers happened on Sunday. Kade Pietrzak, the four-star edge from North Dakota. So we'll get into that. We're going to offer up our win-loss predictions for the 2024 season. So we're going to get on the record today with that as well. So before we do that, please make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get to the comment section, check out HuskerBigRed.com. And Danny, how you doing this morning, man?
Good. Record prediction day, or as I like to say, the day that everybody likes to come back and say, you guys were wrong. No, but I'm excited. It's like you said, Big Ten Media Days, a new commitment. I mean, the season's getting closer. It's hard to believe. And, it doesn't seem like things are slowing down for the football program at all. And it seems like there's always news, and that was certainly the case over the weekend.
Yeah, so let's start there on Sunday. Kade Pietrzak, like I said, four-star defensive end from North Dakota, was kind of, trending a little bit with Oklahoma and Nebraska, kind of flipped that around this week. They got some expert predictions. There was a crystal ball that came in this week. And on Sunday, he made it official, 6'5", 250 pounds. I think he's ranked like 317 overall. He is a four-star recruit. I'll have to double check the ranking. I just space it for a moment, but one of the top recruits in this class, a really great fit, I think, for the 3-3-5 defense. And, anytime you beat out Oklahoma for a blue chip prospect, I'd say that's a win for Nebraska.
Yeah, we talked about the blue chip ratio a couple shows ago. We've been talking about it, and now Nebraska's really kind of done a good job of focusing on blue chip prospects. You had Patriac, you had, even Malcolm Simpson last month, and you have a chance for other recruits to really get into that four-star range. So Patriac is going to be a great fit for this defense, I think. He can also play defensive line a little bit, so that's a plus as well. And again, just another great recruiting job by Terrence Knighton. People were wondering why we were freaking out at the potential rumors of Knighton leaving. I mean, this is why. He's a good recruiter. He's a good coach. He's a good developer. And now you're looking at, a defensive line or a defense in general, if he plays end, where you have talent coming in year after year after year. We've always talked about trying to build the program to where, you can recruit talented players that are first string, second string, the whole deal. And now we're seeing Nebraska start to do that defensively as well.
Yeah, and one thing I really like about Patriac, you kind of touched on it, but he can play multiple spots. I look at him, and I think Jamari Butler's a good comparison just, in terms of what he's going to be positionally. 6'5", 250, so he can play that, kind of five technique down lineman position in the 3-3-5. He can be a pass rusher. He shows some pass rush ability on the interior as well. So depending on how, he kind of develops, he could see some snaps, at defensive tackle in pass rush situations. And I watched him play even offensive line, and I just think his attitude and the way that he approaches the game is really going to fit Nebraska. You talk about the death row defensive line of Terrence Knighton, and this guy, I mean, he fits that to a T. You watch him play offensive tackle, and it's like his sole mission is to put his man into the ground, and he does that quite a bit, and he seems to take enjoyment out of it, which I took enjoyment out of watching him block people. And his first few highlights were of him playing offensive line, and he was just bowling over people. And I was like, okay, I'm excited about this. And so the more I watched him, and the way I watched him finish blocks offensively, really gets me excited. He uses hands really well. His hand placement in terms of a pass rusher, I think, is really going to help him. And that's a really, I guess, underrated thing, or it's something that fans don't look at as much. But knowing how to use your hands, especially as a defensive lineman that's going to be playing in an odd front, is critical. And so big time commitment. The Huskers needed an edge, and they got one. And so you look at this defensive line haul now with Tyson Terry, who I think is underranked, but one of the best players in the state of Nebraska. And then Malcolm Simpson, another blue chip commitment. So Terrence
I'm
Knighton
excited about
really
him.
doing
Not
a
that
good
I'm not
job.
excited about everybody, but I'm excited about Simpson.
Yeah, I think Simpson's going to be a big time player, and Terrence Knighton has done a spectacular job on the recruiting trail. So, that's why people were freaking out about him leaving, because not only has he done a great job developing guys, like Nash Hutchmaker and Ty Robinson, but he's done a great job bringing in talent here too, and even. Got to give him credit for like Cameron Leonard and Prince Will Mameli
Yep.
and Riley Van Poppel. Some of those young guys have shown that he can get them ready to play early.
James Williams, I think I'd add there too. But the only thing I worry about with Terrence Knighton and this coaching staff is the fact that they're going to leave at some point. That's the only thing I worry, because you have Knighton, who I think will go on to bigger and better things. You have Garrett McGuire, who I think will go on to bigger and better things. You have Tony White, who I know for a fact is going to go on to, a higher position. So, I love the fact that we're a developmental, program for both players and coaches. It's just going to sting a little bit when they leave, but that's a testament to how good they are and how hard they work. And Knighton, I feel, is extremely underrated as a coach just nationally. So if he does well at Nebraska and continues to bring in recruits and then gets some love nationally, I'll be happy to see him move on, and definitely wish him the best when that time comes.
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern with him, especially with his NFL background. And
Yeah.
D-line coaches really are worth their weight in gold, whether it's
Yep.
pro, college, whatever. That's a really important position. So I wouldn't surprise me. I think there was even some chatter after last year. I know some local media people were kind of talking about he could potentially leave. And so I definitely think that's going to be on the table. Garrett McGuire definitely could be another guy. My hope is that someday, he'll get a chance to be the offensive coordinator for Nebraska. He'll kind of take that development path, and then potentially leave somewhere to be a head coach. But, his dad also is the head coach at Texas Tech. So at some point you wonder, if he makes the call to bring his son back onto his staff. I mean, that would be a hard thing to say no to. But the thing I like about Matt Rule, though, is he's always got, other guys kind of, on his list. I guess he's always got the list for the future, as we've seen like with Evan Cooper. And I think he also does a great job of developing the coaches he has on the staff, even the ones that are analysts and stuff and things like that. So even when you do lose some of these coaches, I believe that he's got other guys in line. And I think that's a sign of a good head coach. You look at Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh, all these guys that have success, they find really good assistant coaches and they develop them. And I think Matt Rule has shown that he's taking that path at Nebraska.
For sure. And, that's a path you want to take, because you never want to be a dead end job for, a coach. You don't want to be a job where the coach goes, oh, I guess I'll have to go here because it's my only option. You want a coach to go there because they can say, hey, I have a chance to really expand my career, and it starts here at Nebraska. And I get that being a stepping stone program may not be good for stability sometimes, but at the same time, I would rather have a bunch of good coaches want to come to the program, develop, and then move on, instead of being a last resort for many other coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's just about building talent and developing that talent, trying to acquire that talent. Matt Rule, I think, has done a good job of selling Nebraska to people and getting talented people to want to come here. So before we get to our record predictions, let's talk about some more recruiting nuggets. Speaking of talented people, trying to come here, trying to get them to Nebraska. And since we did our show last week and we didn't get another episode in as we planned to, there has been a new, I guess, development with Christian Jones, the top recruit in the state of Nebraska for 2025. There was a new expert projection. So it's starting to feel like Nebraska has some momentum. He hasn't really set a commitment date. I'm not sure if he's going to visit like Wisconsin or Miami this fall, but what do you think about the Christian Jones crystal ball, and how do you assess where Nebraska stands with the 4-star linebacker from Omaha?
There is a visit to Miami scheduled for the end of July, I believe, so probably next week. And once that visit gets over, then I'd feel a little bit better. But overall, I feel like, I'm not saying he is, I feel like he's going to be in. And I also feel like we could take multiple linebackers in this class in addition to just Jones. I know Hawthorne was another potential guy, but as far as Jones is concerned, I feel like we can put, a prediction in that he will be part of the program sooner rather than later. I know, like you said, he potentially had a visit to us constant setup, but I've always felt that Nebraska is going to be the one to land him. He's been trending to Nebraska since last year, and I think it's just been a matter of getting all his recruiting visits in, making sure this is what he wants to do, and I would be very happy to have him, and I can't wait until he's in.
Yeah, I still feel pretty good about where the Huskers stand with him. But yeah, Will Hawthorne's another guy that's out there. And, Sean Callahan from Husker Online is going to say that he feels pretty good about where the Huskers stand with Hawthorne. But I guess my question has been, would they take both of those linebackers? I think that they would.
Yeah.
But, you never know. So we'll see. I mean, Hawthorne has been kind of out there. It seems like it's between Nebraska and Iowa State. So there's a couple guys. The board is definitely, narrowing for the Huskers at this point. You got Hawthorne and Jones at linebacker. You've got David Sanders, who potentially could take a visit to Nebraska. It would have to be this week. So, you're talking about Christian Jones taking that visit to Miami. So this weekend, the dead period opens up. So that's when you can host recruits. It might be it might be this week. It might be more this week, but recruits can take visits this week or this weekend. I'll have to double check on when the dead period
I believe
ends.
it's this weekend.
But I know it is this weekend for sure. It might be like there might be a couple of days earlier, but at any rate, recruits do have a chance to take visits. David Sanders' mom said that they would potentially visit multiple places. So, looking from a Nebraska perspective, I think that they have to get him on campus this weekend or they have no shot at landing his commitment.
Yeah, and I do think I like where we stand as far as the offensive line goes. Obviously, you want Sanders because he's a damn good player, but I think that if we were to miss out on Sanders, it's not the end of the world. I think it's also one of those things where if we start winning, we have a better shot at landing Sanders. But at the same time, I'm pretty happy with where we stand right now. I think we might, take multiple linebackers in this class, and I know we missed out on Dawson Merritt, but Hawthorne and Jones would certainly be a solid combo as well.
Yeah, for sure. I would be happy with both of those guys. And speaking of offensive line, I do like the offensive line class as it stands right now. Brian Tapu, the 3-star offensive tackle commitment, who are just committed to Nebraska, in the past month, posted an offer from Washington on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, last week. And that's sort of a no-no with this Nebraska coaching staff. They don't want their players to post offers like that. So I don't know if either Tapu didn't know that or if he did know that. That could be a sign that maybe his commitment isn't as solid as we think. What's your read on that situation? Are you worried about Brian Tapu in Washington? I mean, he's shown already that he has kind of a penchant for flip-flopping. I mean, he committed to Oregon State, decommitted, and committed to Nebraska. And so, I mean, what's your read on that situation? Are you worried about that commitment at all?
I wouldn't be too worried yet, and I don't know how to say this without sounding like a jerk, but it just doesn't sound like he can figure out, like, does he want to make up his mind? Does he know recruiting etiquette? Because it sounded like originally he wanted to be at Nebraska, and then he committed to Oregon State, and then he changed his mind and wanted to go back to Nebraska. So it just seems like he's sort of confused by the whole process. So I'm not holding that against him, and I'm not trying to speak negatively about him, but I wouldn't worry yet. I mean, I think it might be just a case of, a young kid trying to figure out where he's going in terms of, the recruiting process. Even though he's already committed to Nebraska, I could just see him being more so kind of just being happy about getting an offer. I don't think it's anything to be too worried about yet.
Yeah, it's always hard to say because you don't know how much communication is going on with that offer. Sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's not that much. It really depends on the situation. So we'll see. Like I said, I always worry about recruits and commitments when they visit other places. So this offer, maybe not that big of a deal, but just something to watch because if he does take a visit to Washington, say this weekend, or I'm not saying that he's going to do that this weekend. So I'm just saying if he did, or if we went to a game this fall, then my concern level would rise a bit. But I don't take it as, some people tried to be like, well, maybe they're getting David Sanders. Like, no, they're not. They're not related in any way. But I don't think Nebraska is 100% out of it with David Sanders. It's just interesting because they always talk good about Nebraska, but you always get the sense that Nebraska's on the outside looking in. I'll be interested to see where he visits this week, though. I feel like it's going to be Ohio State and Tennessee, and I feel like he'll end up at one of those two spots. But speaking of actually 5-star tackles, though, before I forget, Jackson Cantwell put Nebraska in his top 14, which I have to say, I think a top 14 is a little bit obnoxious,
Yeah,
but I mean,
yeah.
could have cut it. I mean, you couldn't have cut it to 10. Like you needed to, you needed to, because then, you read the reporting of the teams that are kind of, in the upper half of that top 14. And we're like, why, I'm like, why are we even doing a top 14? But anyway.
Me personally, I don't even bother until it's like a top 5.
Yeah, exactly. Your top 7 or, whatever. But
Even
I do
7
think
seems like a bit much. I don't know. I mean, top 14 just seems like you're bragging about getting a ton of offers. I don't know. Maybe I'm old
it,
school, but
it is interesting. So Cantwell, out of Missouri, 6'7", 300 pounds, the number 3 ranked player overall in 2026, the number 1 offensive tackle. He's visited Nebraska a few times, Missouri, Michigan, Georgia, the usual, Alabama, or some of the teams that are in the mix, for his recruitment. But I do think that Nebraska's got a shot. His parents, both of his parents were Olympians. His dad won a silver medal in the shot put, and he's a shot put state champion, won as a freshman. And one thing Nebraska has going for it is they have shown, a willingness to allow players to do multiple sports. Nash Hutchmaker, Jalen Lloyd, Jeremiah Charles, all these guys. So they're selling him on that. They're working, to allow him to do that, which seems. I mean, if you're an Olympic level athlete, I
yeah.
don't see why you would want to stop that. I'm not saying he is yet, but you could see the potential. So in terms of Jackson Cantwell, I think Nebraska, of that top 14, I think Nebraska is closer to the top 5, and I think that they have a legitimate chance to land him. So maybe after, whiffing on, Brandon Baker and, probably missing on David Sanders, maybe Jackson Cantwell will be, the offensive tackle that will finally get the 5-star.
And he's not a consolation prize by any means either. I was watching some of his highlights the other day, and one of the things I look for in a lineman is when a lineman blocks, do they block and shuffle back into the quarterback's pocket, or do they allow their momentum to go forward? And Cantwell is very much a forward blocker. He's very physical. He can get to the second level when blocking. He's extremely athletic. So he would definitely be a good get for Nebraska, even if they miss out on some of their previous targets. Again, we'll have to see how that top 14 shakes out. Hopefully, we're in his top, 5 or 7 if he narrows it down. But I really like Cantwell's physicality and aggressiveness, and he would be another great player for Donovan Raiola to work with.
Yeah, for sure. That would be interesting to see how that recruitment works out. Nebraska's been trying to, make headway in Missouri. They just hired, Jamar Mosey to, kind of reinforce that pipeline with Missouri. So we'll see. Jackson Cantwell would be a pretty big get. I think that's the last kind of recruiting nugget that I had at this point. You look at the board, like I said, for the 2025 class, Hawthorne, Jones, David Sanders, sort of Michael Terry. I don't know. I don't think he's officially eliminated Nebraska. I know he said in interviews that he's down to like Texas and Oregon, I think, but I don't believe he's officially eliminated Nebraska. So he's still on the board, and that's pretty much it. There's not a lot. I think Nebraska, they've got 17 commitments, and I think they'd like to probably get to 20 and to try to wrap it up, for the most part by the time that the season's over, and then maybe add a few, fall evaluations and fall senior evaluations. But for the most part, I think, the 2024 class is pretty much wrapped up. So we just got to put the bow on it and hopefully add a couple more blue chips.
Yeah, this is going to be a smaller class, and, people knew that coming in, and now it's just about building off the depth that they have. And, I think what Nebraska's done both on the offensive line and in the wide receiver room in particular over the past year and a half has been nothing short of incredible. And now they're in a position where they can really take swings at some of the bigger recruits. And if they miss, it's not going to be the end of the world. And on top of that, you're seeing, the development on the offensive line really come to fruition. Especially last year, I thought the line was much improved. So in addition to the recruiting, the results are showing on the field. And I think that's important as well. And I just hope that they take the next step and continue to develop and perform at a high level, because I do think Raiola is building something special here on the line, and I hope it continues. And I'll eat crow if they do well this year, because I was very hesitant about him coming back.
So speaking of, taking the next step this year, the offensive line in Nebraska as a whole, we'll see if they do that. The offensive line is going to play a key role in that and protecting, Donovan Raiola's nephew, Dylan Raiola, who I've been absolutely torching people with on NCAA 25. That's neither here nor there. But in terms of our record predictions for the 2024 season, I wanted to get on record for today, and we'll do some more. We'll probably go through like a game by game prediction later. We'll do some position previews and stuff like that as we get into fall camp. So this isn't going to be our last prediction. We'll have some bold predictions as well at some point. A lot of predictions to come. But in terms of this season and what you think the overall record is, I guess just tell me what you think your record is going to be for Nebraska this season and why, and maybe what are some of the losses going to be?
Ooh, so I think looking at the schedule overall, I think we're going to see 8-4. I think we're going to lose to USC, Ohio State, Colorado, and Wisconsin. And I do think that we can go 5-1 during the first 6 games of the season. I do think Colorado is going to give us trouble. I hope not, but I think that's going to happen. And, I think at the end of the day that we're going to be in a bowl game and we're going to have coverage extending into late December, which is what we've wanted all along since we started this podcast. But I think 8-4 is realistic. I know some people have said 10-2. And I would love 10-2, but there's always a game or two where that Nebraska just looks horrible in, and you're just like, that shouldn't have happened. So I think 8-4 is my final. Well, not my final, I should say. My prediction for today.
8-4. I like 8-4. I'm really close to being that. I definitely can agree with the losses. Ohio State, USC. But I look at these first, I don't want to predict Nebraska going 7-0, but I look at these first 7 games and I just don't see them a game that's a for sure loss. I do think they could lose to Colorado. I do think that's going to be a tough game.
Yeah.
And I'm worried about the secondary holding up against Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter and those guys.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that Colorado is going to have a tough time slowing us down. I think that they're going to have a tough time blocking our defensive line. And I think they're going to have a tough time slowing down Nebraska's running game. And I think part of that would be a great strategy, just like pounding the rock and, keeping Shadur on the sidelines as much as possible. But anyway, so I think they're going to win that game. I really do. I just feel like they're going to win that game on that Saturday night. Beat Northern Iowa, Illinois. At Purdue worries me, and taking your quarterback on the road for the first time. But
Purdue's always been tough to play anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say that they're gonna start 6-1 and that they're gonna lose at Purdue or at Indiana. They're gonna lose one of those 2 road games, kind of a surprise. However, they'll still be 6-1. I think they'll beat UCLA.
Yep.
I think they're gonna beat Wisconsin at home, and then I think they are gonna beat Iowa on the road. So even though I have them losing to Indiana or Purdue, I'm still going to have them finish with a 9-3 record and a really big victory. Maybe a victory that gets us into the top 25 at the end of the season over Iowa, maybe into what used to be called the Outback Bowl. I don't know what you call it anymore. The Car Quest or who the hell knows that bowl game they play in Tampa. But I do think 9-3 is realistic. But I could also see, 6-6. They have to win 6 games though. If this team does not win 6 games, like I might smash my head through the wall. Like I just don't know what I'll do with myself.
Don't do that. Don't do that. I like you. Don't do that. There's a lot of people whose heads I want to smash to the wall, but yours isn't one of them. But I just see Wisconsin being a trouble game. I don't know, just because Wisconsin always plays us tough, and they've played us tough historically, and the fact that Wisconsin is going to be at home is a plus because Cam Brandle's tough, but I just see Wisconsin as a toss-up game. I think we're more talented, but they just give us trouble. I still remember Jonathan Taylor in 2019 just running all over us, and insert Wisconsin running back here running all over us. So we'll see. They don't have Braylon Allen anymore, so that's good, but they're still very talented.
Yeah, and they do have Tyler Van Dyke, so I'm interested to see how he kind of upgrades their quarterback room. And they always find running backs and offensive linemen, although they do have a new coaching staff. So we'll have to see if Luke Fickell can keep that tradition going, like the old Wisconsin guys did, because he's like the first outside guy to really take that job. But I do think it's going to be tough, and I think Iowa's going to be a tough game. I mean, you look at like the preseason All Big Ten teams, and they have more players on it than we do. Which you could probably say the same thing about Wisconsin. So I just have a feeling, that's just my feeling, that this team defensively, I mean, if we had a quarterback last year, we would have beat them. And I don't think Cade McNamara is that great for Iowa, but their defense is tough. I just feel like this year, finally, we're going to beat Colorado and beat those stupid teams in the Big Ten West that we should have been beating these last like 5 years. Now that the Big Ten West is over with, we'll finally beat them and not make the playoff and not really be in the mix, but probably ranked going into our bowl game, which would be, I'd be over the moon with that. That would be just an incredible kind of stepping stone season to potentially competing for the playoff. The next 2 years that Dylan Raiola will be starting, because I believe in my heart of hearts that he'll be at Nebraska for 3 years and then he'll be a top 10 draft pick in the NFL.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. And, you surrounded him with the offensive line, you surrounded him with the wide receivers, but this season is going to tell a lot. I'm not going to say it's a make or break it year for Matt Rule, but it's a very important year for Matt Rule. And I think he knows that. And it'll be interesting to see, who steps up and, how many freshmen really will be able to make an impact, because we've been talking about this particular freshman class for quite some time now. And I'm excited to see what they bring to the table.
That sounds like an entire podcast, Danny, about freshmen who could make an impact in the 2024 season. So maybe that'll be our next.
Right as we end our
next
first
episode.
one, almost we think of a good podcast idea. But I mean, no, this class has been talked about for forever, and now they're here, and now it's going to be up to them to see what they can do. And to be quite honest with you, I don't get a sense of dread or worry that they're not ready, because I fully believe that they're ready. You listen to Dylan Raiola talk, and he's ready. He's been preparing for this. He's ready. And, these guys know what they want to do, and these guys know that they want to be the first team in quite a while to win football games and get to a bowl game. And I think everybody knows that. And I like how the schedule works this year, so we'll see. I mean, I hate making bold statements because it seems like we make them all the time, and then it never comes to fruition, but I do feel good about this year.
Yeah, I feel good about this team too. I think we've got the right coach. I mean, check out HuskerBigRed.com, because this on Saturday, I think I wrote, 3 reasons why Nebraska will make a bowl game this season. So I laid it out some reasons why, you can take it to the bank that Nebraska is going to play in a bowl game this season. And then I also laid out 3 freshmen not named Dylan Raiola, who I think can make an impact this season, because he's obvious. The others not so much, and I think it is going to be a little bit challenging for freshmen to get on the field just with how deep this team is. Yeah. So at any rate, check that out. We got a lot of great content there at HuskerBigRed.com, and so check that out, you guys. And that's all the content we have for today. We'll come back with another episode, and maybe we will break down those freshmen, early guys that are going to make an impact. I should note, Big Ten Media Days is coming up, so that's going to be Wednesday for Nebraska, 12:30 Eastern time in Indianapolis for the Huskers. So Matt Rule, I got to look back at who's joining I'm blanking on that right now.
I can pull it up in a second here, so just keep talking and then I'll pull it up for you.
So, but at any rate, joining Nebraska on that day is going to be Tuesday's Illinois, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Purdue, and Ohio State. Then so Nebraska's got Ben Scott, I got it.
Ty Robinson
and Isaac Gifford, yeah. And so that'll be Wednesday, at 12:30. So we'll get to hear from Matt Rule at 12:30. The guys will have some breakout sessions
to represent Nebraska. I like those picks.
Yeah, they're good picks. I mean, and it's honestly, it was kind of a tough decision because, there's a lot of really good guys that could have been there, like Nash Hutchmaker isn't there, and he could be there. Malcolm Hartzog is another guy that comes to mind. So Bryce Benhart, there's a lot of guys that could have been picked. And I think that they did a good job. And it's always fun to hear from Matt Rule. Matt Rule always, it's always, you always learn something when he goes to the podium. I guess I'll say that.
I'm just glad it's not Dylan Raiola, because that takes the focus off of him for a little bit. And I know people want to hear from him, and people were like, why isn't the quarterback coming to the media days? He'll get his chance to speak. He'll be doing a lot of interviews over the next couple of years. So I'm glad that they kind of took him out of the spotlight as far as the media days are concerned. And I love Ben Scott, I love Ty Robinson, and I love Isaac Gifford, and they truly embody what the program is all about. So, I mean, just the fact that Robinson came back after having a chance to go to the NFL last year speaks to that. And same thing with Isaac Gifford, and the fact that Scott, a transfer last year, made such a big impact on the offensive line. That's a testament to what they bring to the program. So they're definitely a worthy trio.
Yeah, all three of those guys could be in an NFL training camp this
Yep.
week instead of at Big Ten Media Days. So that's a feather in the cap for the Huskers, and we'll see what they have to say on Wednesday. We'll be reporting on that. We'll have another episode this week, either probably Wednesday or Thursday, maybe Thursday, so we can recap Big Ten Media Days and then talk about impact freshmen for the 24 season. So check that out. Please check out HuskerBigRed.com, and as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.